ทุกท่านฮะก็เดี๋ยวเพื่อเกรกเราก็จะมีภาษาอังกฤษงงๆหน่อยละกันนะก็ Good evening everyone. My name is Mangkon Chayalametri. I'm a current president of Thai Association of Landscape Architects. I'm going to be a moderator for this evening sessions here. So which is all about, just like what we see over here is the leading with landscape, the power of collaborations, layering landscape over infrastructure, and the importance of integrated arts. This is a series of the Architecture and Design for Society lecture series, academic year of 2025, from the Faculty of Architecture at Chulalongkorn University. This series is a monthly event organized by the Faculty of Architecture, and each sections bring together leading professional and researchers, both local and international, to share their experiences, ideas, inspirations in design that benefit the society. And for this special lecture, together with Thai Associations of Landscape Architects, we have invited a renowned landscape architect, Mr. Greg Smallenberg, from PFS Studio, Canada. And more over regarding the series, for those who are registered architects, is that registered architects here, or licensed professionals, please note that today's lecture is eligible for continuing professional development point or CPD หรือพวตน้องๆเดี๋ยวใครไม่รู้อะไรเดี๋ยวถามพี่เขาแล้วกันนะ And for the student who attend more than 80% of the lectures this semester, you will receive certificate of completions, and that can also collect a credit unit toward your academic program here in Faculty of Architecture at Chulalongkorn University. Okay, and before we begin, I would like to express our sincere appreciation to Skun Thai for their kind support for today's event. Okay, now may I invite รองศาสตราจารย์ดร.วาริชาวงศ์พยัคฆ์ to deliver the opening remarks and extend our gratitude to today's speaker.
Thank you, ค่ะพี่มังกร Good evening, everyone, and very warm welcome. On behalf of the Faculty of Architecture, Chulalongkorn University, it is my pleasure to welcome you all to our Architecture and Design for Society Lecture Series 2025. And this platform brings together speakers from all over the world to share their ideas and to tell us how they work. And this evening, we are very honored to have Greg Smallenberg, founding principal of PFS Studio. His expertise spans urban design and landscape architecture. And his extensive experience in large-scale projects range from regional open space plans and to highly detailed project implementation throughout Canada, the United States, Europe, and Asia. And through his lecture, we hope to explore how the power of collaboration between landscape, infrastructure, and arts can contribute to sustainable community and society. Before we begin, I would like to extend our appreciation to Thai Association of Landscape Architects and the Department of Landscape Architecture for co-hosting this lecture. And also I would like to thank you, P. Mangkon, the President of Thai Association of Landscape Architects, for kindly serving as our MC today. Thank you for all joining us, and please join me in welcoming Greg Smallenberg.
Okay, so I think we ready นะก็ so let me begin with a brief introduction for Mr. Smallenberg. As the tonight's lecture topic is all about leading with landscape, the power of collaborations. So we deeply honored to have Mr. Greg Smallenberg, founding principal of PFS Studio, one of the Canada's leading planning, urban design, and landscape architecture firm, which established in 1990. The firm is also received the American Architecture Prize Firm of the Year, and the firm that earned the most award for landscape and urban design from the Canadian Society of Landscape Architects. Greg is also a fellow of both Canadian and American Society of Landscape Architecture, an honor held by the only a few professionals across the North America region. His extensive work spanned from the large-scale regional open space strategy to university master plan, urban park, public realm design in the countries around the world, including USA, Canada, China, Australia, Thailand, France, and Italy. So among his projects, there are some examples that we probably seen today. The Lansdowne Park, Sherborne Commons, and Pungo New Master Plan. So he is also carrying his visions of city building and environmental integrity from Canada to Asia, promoting the city that are walkable, greener, and more sustainable. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Mr. Greg Smallenberg.
I've never given a presentation sitting down, so this is going to be interesting. And I have jet lag, so if I fall asleep, I want you all to try to wake me up, okay? So, good evening, Sawadee Cup, and thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be here. I want to give a heartfelt thank you to my good friend Pak Kop Kansanti and Kun Mangorn, Tala, and all the faculty at Chula for making all of this happen. I considered in the beginning of giving more of an academic lecture. I lecture at a variety of universities around the world. Sometimes I fall into the academic side, but I'm not doing that tonight because your faculty here at Chula possesses a lot more depth and knowledge than I do. A lot of Harvard types here, so you're very lucky to have the faculty that you do have here. So my talk tonight is going to be mostly a presentation. There'll be a little bit of a lecture, but I'd really just call it advice. My interest is trying to be pragmatic, give you useful information for those of you that are starting your career or starting your studies here at the university. I can tailor the presentation to the mood and the makeup of the audience. So how many landscape architecture students are here? Could you put up your hands? Okay. Now, did we get lucky? Did we snag any architecture students? Not a one. That's telling. How about emerging professionals? How many professionals are here? Oh, a couple over there. And how about faculty? Oh, there's one. Okay. Well, that makes it easier. I am going to rely a little bit on notes tonight because I was told that I have an hour. I'm going to take an hour, but there should be lots of time for questions later, and I encourage you to ask me questions. Ask me some easy questions and ask me some hard questions, and I promise I'll try to answer it. So I have spent a good deal of time in Thailand, mostly as a tourist on vacation, holidays. But in my time here, I've developed a really strong appreciation for Thai culture. I regret I can't speak Thai. I did pick up a few phrases on the golf course. You probably heard some of them, Tok Nam, Tok Sai, Mai Di, Mak Mak. That was my golf experience, so I think I'm fairly well versed in the Thai language. But in Thailand, I have discovered a country that I believe is committed to design in all facets. So I'm talking about the rituals that are performed, to the fabric and the art, to the way that food arrives in a beautiful way on your plate, that there's something deep in Thai culture that seems to express itself through design. So the fact that you're here studying about design or practicing design makes perfect sense, and there seems to be an ingrained passion for it. As a design professional, I see that some of your landscapes, they hold an aesthetic, a strong sense of culture and history, proportion, detail. I see all that, mostly in the landscape, in some of the architecture, but certainly in the landscape, I see all of that. And there also seems to be a high regard for beauty. And beauty is, in my mind, one of the essential components of life. So it's all very exciting and refreshing. We are going to show some slides in a while, but I got to get through all of this. Several years ago, I did try to work in Thailand. I was invited to work on a couple of resorts in Phuket. It was with a consortium of Canadians and Americans and Thai. They were putting together a couple of property proposals. But it soon became very apparent to the Canadians and the Americans that Thai regulations and approvals, and particularly the complications of Thai land ownership, scared them away. They left. My foray into doing a project here in Thailand was never realized. So maybe one day it'll happen. But even that brief moment was very exciting to me to maybe possibly get involved in something here. I haven't tried this before, but like many of, I think, the professionals, maybe not the students, I've attended a lot of lectures and presentations throughout my career, and it is a great way to learn, and I wish more and more students would recognize that these are freebies. These are some of the best moments of your university education, and so I look at it that way. But when I reflect upon the ones that I was most engaged with is when I learned a little bit about the presenter himself, him or herself. And I was at an IFLA conference in Prague many years ago. There was a presenter there that just to begin the introduction to his lecture, he talked briefly about his home. And he did it in a way that sort of just drew me in. So I've never done this before, but I'm going to try it because Thai culture and the geographic location of Thailand is such a distance from Canadian culture that I'm going to share a couple of very quick personal moments with you. All right. This is my home. This is Vancouver. Vancouver is the third largest city in Canada. It has a population of about 3 million people, and it has a landmass of about 120 square kilometers. So to put this in sort of terms that might be clearer to you, by the numbers, Bangkok's population is about 5 times greater, and its land area is 12 times larger. So Vancouver is a very small city, certainly relative to Bangkok and relative to a lot of the other cities in the world. It's located on the Pacific Ocean. You can see a little bit of, well, that's not the Pacific, that's an inlet, but you can see the ocean that surrounds the city. It has constantly been recognized as one of the most livable cities in the world. And from the point of it being beautiful, it certainly deserves that recognition. But it's been a blessing and a curse. The extraordinary nature, and you can see it here, the mountains, the oceans, the beaches, they've distracted people that live in Vancouver who think that that's all they have to sort of contemplate and embrace. And so they're much less interested in design landscapes. So people like landscape architects, it's a little bit more difficult to convince people that certain things should happen. So it's become sort of a peripheral city where its edges are really well respected and well loved, well used, but the heart of the city is less so. And so so it's an interesting thing. It's a situation where the city becomes more expensive and ironically a lot poorer because of the focus on its edges. If you look at that, let's see, there we go, this little red dot up here, that's where I live. I live in an area, it's called the North Shore Mountains, and it's one of the last true areas in and around Vancouver that has kept its natural landscape. So I'm very fortunate to live up there, and I'm relatively close to the city. So I live at, this is a typical suburban neighborhood. This is not such a typical suburban house. We're the oddball on the block, but this is the front, and this is the back. Very fortunate to live in an environment like this, where in the back area of my home, we have a forest like this. There's a stream that runs through it. There are coyotes and raccoons. I don't know whether you have coyotes and raccoons here in Thailand, but we have bears that occasionally run through our property as well. So it's a wonderful place to be living. So in the front of my house, to respond, I've created a design landscape. In the back of my house, we've created a natural landscape. And the only reason I've been really telling you all this is just to give you a sense of who I am. That's all, and where I've come from. So enough about me. William Lyon Mackenzie King was the 10th Prime Minister of Canada, and he died long before any of you were born. He died before I was born. He was eccentric by most measures, but he was a very successful leader, and he once said that you can tell a man's character by the quality of his garden. So this is the Prime Minister of our country referring to the character of a person by the quality of their garden. And I think about this today, and I think you don't have to possess a garden, but if you tend a garden or you design a garden, you're part of that club. And so I would guess that most of the people in this room are a very great character because of that. This has been put in here to make sure that you're all paying attention. I was reading an article on Benchikiti Park here in Bangkok, and I actually was able to go there yesterday and spend several hours in the park. It was pretty delightful. When I was reading about the park, getting more research about it, in an article I came across, there was an interview, and I apologize if I don't get the name correct, by Kun Chachanan of Arsomslip, is that right? I probably ruined that pronunciation, but the woman that worked with Kong Jian Yu to develop the park. When she was asked about some of the project's biggest challenges, this is how she responded. It was the aligning of all stakeholders to a shared vision of using nature-based solutions and convincing them that these solutions were not only feasible, but transformative. You'll notice that she answered the question. She didn't say it was a design challenge. This is the challenge, and this is the real challenge. This is a very important statement that she made. And although not all of my work would be considered nature-based, most of it is, and I find her comments very true, and it reinforces my view that beyond having planning and design expertise, which many of you probably have, to succeed in this profession, you need to be persuasive, you have to be well-researched, you have to be pragmatic, you have to be cooperative, and as important as all of those other things, you have to be collaborative. So in a way, it changes some people's perspective of what design school is all about. It's all about communication and convincing people. And by the way, I was very saddened. I don't know if any of you know Kong Jian Yu. He was a friend and a colleague. He died in a plane crash just several months ago. And landscape architecture has lost a giant. There's no question about that. And I suppose this is one of his last delivered projects. And so it's a pretty big honor for Bangkok to have this piece here. Okay, so this is the lecture part. Most of tonight is going to be a presentation. This is the lecture, or maybe really just some advice. So this list of points, this probably is going to sound trite, but I've been doing landscape architecture for 40 years. And I was trying to think, well, what do I tell students that are beginning, or what do I tell professionals that maybe have been in the game a couple of years? what was most important to me. And I boil it down to a few things. The first thing is, I mean, life is really short. So yes, you have to work hard, but you have to have fun. If you don't have fun in this profession, you should move on, because to have fun is to be creative, and it's just really important. The other thing is to take risks. In school, and your professors have probably told you this, you have to take risks, take crazy risks. I mean, don't be silly about it, but you really have to risk it all, because when you get out into the professional world, you won't be able to take so many risks. Explore your opportunities really means broadening your outlook. So some of you will be great designers, some of you will be more strategic planners, but there's a place in the profession for people that are good in business, for people that are good in politics. In fact, business and politics is a lot of the power behind landscape architecture and urban design and architecture. So if that's where your skills lie, you can still be a huge contributor to the profession. The next one is draw, and we have actually a famous person with an incredible drawing hand over here, Kun Pak. In this age of AI and computer-aided design, you can create incredible renderings. You all know that. I know that. Everybody knows that. But you have to draw. You have to move from your brain to your hand to the paper and back and forth and back and forth. Even if you abandon that later and move into a fancy rendering, draw. That's how you're going to learn so many things about design. Deferring judgment simply means that your first idea is probably not your best idea, and you need to explore until you have no time left, and you will find the right answer, but it probably won't be your first one. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. Listening. Well, this is the case for all professions, but in the design profession, it's really important. If you don't listen, you're going to end up with no clients. So you have to listen to what people are really telling you. If you have a good idea, you hold your ground and you can push back, but you have to be able to listen. And the last one is really, you won't be saving the world through landscape architecture. Some of my old professors used to say stuff like that. Used to say that you would save the world. You won't, but you will make the world a better place, one landscape at a time. So this is a noble profession. Gardening is a noble profession, but landscape architecture and urban design is a very noble profession. You're city building. You're making this a better place. So you should keep that in mind as you move through your studies. So that was for the student list, and then I thought, well, what about the emerging professional list? And by the way, we're going to be getting to some nice pictures in a little while, but bear with me. For emerging professionals, here are my points. The competition out there is absolutely fierce. If you're already in it, you know how fierce it is. So being good is not good enough. You have to be excellent. Temper your enthusiasm. All that means that I've just told the students that they should take as many risks as they possibly can. When you're in as a professional with a business, you can take some risks, but don't risk your business. So you have to temper some of what you're doing as an emerging professional. Collaborate. I can't say this more than enough, and it took me years to realize that doing things by myself wasn't the best way to come up with the best solution. And collaborating, there's just two heads are better than one. And you get to learn so much more by working with other people to come up with solutions to everything. But sometimes you have to realize that you are alone, that you can be around a table and realize that there are professionals there that don't share your enthusiasm for making the world a better place. So you have to be ready for that too, and you have to be ready to push on regardless. The last 2 points, business first. This does not sit well with creative people, but this is what I've found, is that if you want to attract better work and hire more staff and have a more creative space and a better design library and travel opportunities and be able to withstand the thin times when economic troubles hit a country, you have to have a strong business. And so, as much as it pains me to say it, having a strong business sense means design freedom. If it isn't you, then it better be your business partner, because you have to have that combination of things. And lastly, develop a brand. There's all sorts of examples of this, but the best one I could think of, back to Kong Jian Yu, I think he was the one that coined the term sponge city. But for years, back in the 1970s, people were talking about stormwater retention and stormwater detention. But when you use words like stormwater retention and detention, it doesn't stick with anybody. You use the term sponge city. Now, sponge city is used as a term all around the world. And it's garnered the attention of politicians and developers and administrators. And now all these cities are doing what they should have been doing 20 or 30 years ago, just with that one brand. So it's sort of like branding. That's the way I would look at it anyhow. Okay, so that was the lecture. This is the presentation. I want to share with you a couple more text-laden slides, but they're important. There are three pieces that I've taken from colleagues of mine. The first one is from Michael von Valkenburg, who's a friend and a colleague, and wrote the foreword in our book that we published several years ago. And this is important because, again, it doesn't really talk so much about design, but it says, PFS has a masterful command of the communicative power of landscape in a practice that is very rooted in place, even as it expands around the globe. The landscape designed by PFS, whether they are wholly urban or partly natural, emerge as centers of multidimensional experience and demonstrate a resourceful approach to the pragmatics of integrated design thinking. There's a lot in that, but the important ones are multi-dimensional experience and integrated design thinking. And it comes to the heart of what I'm trying to talk about today, about collaboration and about cooperation and about communication, that our firm has become successful because we've been able to understand what that means to a politician, an administration, a businessman, etc. The second quote, and there's only three, that's why I was wishing there was architecture students here. This was written by one of the most noted architects in Canada for his heritage work and his international studies. His name is Julian Smith. He said, if architects were the primary form givers in the 20th century, landscape architects will be the primary placemakers of the 21st century. That's really encouraging. I think it's true. This was written about 12 years ago. And every year I'm more and more convinced that landscape architecture and urban design is going to solve an awful lot of problems that have been created by other professions, and it will be this profession's time to shine. So those of you that are studying in landscape architecture or just starting out in your practice in landscape architecture, I think you can take heart in the fact that a lot more people are paying attention to this sort of stuff. And my last quote, I had this amazing professor in my university long ago, longer than I care to remember. And she took this, I think, out of an architecture book and then just added the word landscape to it. But I've kept this pinned to my desk, and every once in a while when I get beat up by a client, or I've had a bad day, I'm feeling a little demotivated, I'll kind of look at this and laugh, and it keeps me going. And and the woman's name was Maura Quayle that gave me this. It says, good landscape architecture makes you feel like dancing, but great landscape architecture makes you feel like you are dancing. And bad landscape architecture makes you want to sit down and take a rest. So the motivation here is to go for greatness, because that's the best place to be, and that's what we have to do. And that's certainly, as students, that's what you have to do. Tonight's presentation, I'm going to use 5 projects to identify several strategies that I believe are expanding the opportunities for landscape architects and urban designers. Some of these, so each one of these projects I'm going to talk about, there's 3 from Canada and there's 2 from China, if we have the time. And if we run out of time, somebody can cut me off. Just give me a 10-minute warning or something like that. But I want to talk about these strategies that are all embedded in these projects before I talk about the projects. So the first one is leading with landscape. I was an attendee at a 2009 Urban Design Conference held in Toronto. Canada. I presented with James Corner, with Michael von Valkenburg, and Adrian Guz was supposed to show up, but he was too busy, so somebody else from West State was there. So it was a very powerful roundtable, if you will. And the idea was to initiate new communities by planning, designing, and completing landscapes before buildings. So in Canada, this idea has taken hold, that you do landscape first as the basis for a community. It's a very, very interesting approach. And there's all sorts of advantages that come with this. The second is the power of collaboration. Back to Kun Chatchanan's comment about Benjamin Park. You want to get as many professionals working on a common purpose as possible, and it ensures excellence. So if you have got engineers and architects and geographers and artists, you want them all together. You don't want everybody working in silos. You want them all together working on this stuff, and you would just be astounded what kinds of design success that comes out of this power of collaboration. The third one is layering infrastructure. The biggest budgets, certainly in urban works, are engineering budgets. They are not landscape architecture budgets. Engineering budgets are probably 10 to 100 times greater than landscape architecture budgets. If you want to have a really transformative project, when you can, you try to make friends with the engineers and you piggyback on their projects. You can not only help them in their abilities to deliver something, but at the same time you're doing city building, you are convincing politicians, you're convincing the administration that they can do two things at once. It doesn't cost them more, it just makes a city better. So it's a really important pursuit, if you will. Leveraging public art, there's nothing worse than plunk art, or what we call plop art, that ends up in landscapes. Integrated art makes landscapes sing, and plunk art or plop art makes landscapes cry. And so what I mean by that is if you've got art embedded into your team and the art becomes part of the design, you can feel it, you can see it, you can feel it, and you'll see some of it in this work here. Whereas if you design something and somebody came by later and said, let's put this here with no reflection on the context or the history or the meaning of it, it really doesn't mean anything, and that's what makes landscapes cry. And the last one is creating beauty. I have often been criticized, and beauty is often criticized, as superficial and aesthetically driven. I disagree wholeheartedly, because without beauty in the world, we have little left. So whatever you end up with in your design pursuits, whatever the final product is, it should be beautiful. It can work, it can be certainly functional, but it should be beautiful. Now, at the center of my professional interest is the city, its public realm, and at the heart of that public realm is the urban park. And I see really big transformations underway in the design and delivery of urban parks and the way that the public view urban open space. It's all shifting now. Back in the 1960s, I don't know, I was joking a little while ago with some of the faculty here about the fact that I doubt whether very many of you read books sitting in this library anymore. And that's true for, it's not a criticism of any of the students here, it's true of every university around the world. Now that we have the internet, it's just an awful lot easier to look at things on your computer. But one of the most important, I think, people in the landscape architecture movement was Ian McHarg back in the 60s, and he had a book called Design with Nature. If you're going to read a book, read that one. It's really little, too. There's only 5 or 6 chapters in it. It will outline what has always been the challenge in terms of making cities more livable. And his notion was of naturalizing or bringing nature into the cities. And these are some of the photographs that he used in his book. Now, we don't have the industrialization like we had then. We've moved beyond that. Cities have gotten a lot better. But this is what we have. We have information distraction. There was a friend of mine who was a writer for a very famous magazine in Canada called The Walrus, and he coined this whole movement towards technology as being chronically distracting, that we we are in a constant state of distraction because we actually have more information than we can process. And that's not bad. It's just a reality that we are being bombarded with so many things all at once that we are distracted. And one of the ways that we can become undistracted and become a little McHargian is to create nature in cities. Nature is scientifically proven, medically proven now to do all sorts of things to human consciousness, to thinking. It's just a very healthy thing to do. So I think the urban park is one of the solutions. So green hearts are what I call the urban parks. They're the important parts of the city, and they will eventually be the biggest contributor to city building and city life. There was a woman, Betsy Barlow Rogers. She was the founder of the Central Park Conservancy in New York City. She said, as the city becomes more park-like, the park becomes more city-like. And what she's talking about is the gray becomes green and the green becomes gray. And the successful cities are able to merge those two in a way that is an equitable balance between built and natural. And I think she's right. Daniel Libeskind, famous North American architect, Canadian, he said in a book that he wrote about design in Toronto that we are what we look at, we are what we live in, and we are what we aspire to. And those words are just so true. And if you're dedicated to building better cities, nothing is closer to the truth. And there's no more of an appropriate place to apply Liebeskind's words than to focus on a better design for our public realm, our streets, our parks, our public open space. Okay, so with all of that, here goes some work to show you guys. The end of the conventional park. I'm going to show you 3 parks tonight. 2 are from the city of Toronto, which is the largest city in Canada. 1 is from the city of Ottawa, which is the capital of Canada. They're all unconventional. They certainly have moved beyond this notion of grass and trees and benches. The public isn't interested in any of that anymore, and as designers, you probably aren't interested in any of that anymore. So parks have become, in a sense, unconventional until I suppose they become conventional for their unconventionalness. Sherbourne Common, it was just one of the parks I'm going to talk about, Underpass Park. They're both in Toronto, but they're very, very different. One is a major urban park on the waterfront in Toronto, and the other one is tucked behind an underpass, or under an overpass in a very rough part of the city. The third park is Lansdowne. It's in the city of Ottawa, and it was part of an international design competition. Sherbourne Common, when it first came out, the first article that came written about it was titled with the headline, Clean, Green, Brainy, and Blue. And there's a good reason for that, and I'm going to hopefully be able to describe that. So this is my personal opus of 40 years of design. I think this is the project that means the most to me. It has multiple layers in it. It talks about everything, or it illustrates everything that I've talked about. So leading with landscape, collaboration, layering of infrastructure, integrated art, and creating beauty. It's all part of this project. And in the early days when it was completed, the Atlantic magazine in New York City named it as one of the best parks on the planet. So that was quite a feather in our firm's cap. It was something that we didn't expect. It also won the top award at the ASLA and multiple awards from the CSLA. So you can see that it's central to the downtown Toronto waterfront. There's the core of the city right there. This was all vast industrial land. It's all being redeveloped by a group called Waterfront Toronto. This was one of the first projects to happen along that stretch. Like so much of our work, it started as a brownfield site. So this was the site before we got going on it. And I mentioned before, our planning work started with the whole community. So we were hired along with an architect out of Boston to design this one section of the waterfront. So it wasn't just designing a park, it was creating the community that the park was going to fit in. Sherbourne is the one in the middle with the red dashes around it. And what we were trying to do in the general party of the community was to extend the streets But the city was blocked by railway tracks, an elevated freeway, and an arterial road. And so the trick was to try to drag those streets through so that the city of Toronto could celebrate its waterfront again. You can see in here, this was a rendering of the completed project, not the completed project, this was a rendering to imagine what kind of a development would occur there. And what's surprising, I'm going to show you the photograph of what did occur, and it's pretty close. There was, so PFS did the first piece, Sherburne Common in the middle. We planned for the rest of it. But Westate did the waterfront. Claude Cormier's firm did a place called Sugar Beach, and Tom Balsley out of New York City did another park on the other side of this community. So it was laden with very, very great landscape architecture, and it's proven to be just a wild success in the city of Toronto. Oh, whoops. So this is the build out here. You can see that it's almost true to the renderings. I mean, the architecture has changed, densities have changed, developers have tried to make more money, but the fundamentals of the community remain the way that it was drawn in the original. So Sherburne Common was all about art and architecture and engineering. There were 3 components to it, so you try to keep things simple. The first one was the woods. The second was the water. And the third is the green. And this is the classic makeup of a Canadian recreational landscape. You go off in the woods, there's the woods, the water, and the green. And so we took that as inspiration and conceptualized it into this park. So as the design unfolded, so here's one of those fancy computer drawings, but it started with a hand drawing. We did this partly to convince the public. The public in Toronto was very skeptical of any of this because they had been faced with bad development after bad development after bad development. And this group called Waterfront Toronto, who we worked with, wanted to change all of that. And so they asked us to create some of these renderings, which ended up being massive scale hoardings going around the whole community. There was probably about a dozen of our drawings that was up on these massive boards for about 2 years to convince the public that this is what they were getting. And in the end, this is what they got. And so I think the success of projecting the idea of getting the public excited was a very valuable thing to do. Now, early on in the project, I guess it started as more of an aesthetically driven idea, but it very quickly became much more of that. We convinced the client that the park should double as a much-needed stormwater treatment facility. Toronto, like so many cities, has stormwater problems. Theirs was contaminated stormwater problems. So that's different than just flooding. They had water quality problems. And so we convinced them that we could build a park and build on the infrastructure that they required and put 2 things together as one. And to our surprise, the client agreed. Well, the client was a tripartite government client. They had a lot of power. This was good news to them. It was a good story, and so they agreed to go along with it. So the concept here was to develop a plan, which the area in blue was the zone that we would pick up stormwater, channel it into a variety of devices. It would end up being stored underneath the waterfront. Oops. Westate's waterfront. This was going to be box culverts in here, so the water would come down through the city from the old roads and the new roads, collect in here, get to a point where, again, Westate was designing this, then it was pumped back to Sherburne Common, and I'm going to show you all this in a second. It went into a new technology developed by a Canadian engineering firm, UV technology that purified the water, and then it was pumped up into some art and ended up coming back into the lake. Now let me see if I can show you that. Go back. So the water that's moving towards the park ends up in a facility like this, which is underneath a building like this. So we worked with the cutting-edge engineers. Stephen Teeple is one of the most celebrated Canadian architects. And I wanted architects to be here because we hire architects. We don't always work with them, but we hire them. And so we hired Stephen to do this for us in our park. And it was a wonderful form of collaboration. We hired the engineers. It's a great way of having your profession work for a change. The water from the UV filtration was pumped up into these 3 towers. It's called light showers. This is integrated art. A famous artist from Vancouver, a woman named Jill Anholt, created these. So the water gets pumped up into these towers, then it falls down these stainless steel screeds. It comes through biofiltration into this water channel. The water flows down the water channel. Kids were swimming in this on the first day of opening. Before it started, this was polluted water. Now it's 99.9% clean water. So you have to understand all the ramifications of what this kind of an idea brings. This is a very small solution to a small area, but it begins to point to much bigger, larger solutions that can be solved in very unconventional ways. So I think I'm just going to end with a few photographs here. You can see some of the park, daytime, nighttime. Some of the details. When you walk by the water screeds, it had motion sensors in there that you could interact with, so you could change the color of the screeds. You could do all sorts of figures in it, so you became part of the park as you moved through these things. The water feature in front of the pavilion doubled as an ice rink, because in Toronto, you guys probably don't see very much of this, but in Canada we see a lot of this. So in the wintertime it's a skating rink. But in the summertime it can be a performance area, just people having fun, kids having fun. We were able to spend a lot of time and effort and money on detailing and material because we were able to take advantage of the engineering budget that was attributed to this park. So there was a lot of money to spend on this park. The only unfortunate thing is this park was too smart. So I'm going to criticize what I've just said, all these wonderful things about it. The first day that the Parks Department took over the park, they broke a bunch of things because it was new. They hadn't had to do this. They didn't have to make adjustments and do all sorts of crazy stuff. And so the park has suffered because of that. We got sort of 2 steps ahead of ourselves, and now we're just in the process of putting it all back together again. All right. Now the next park is Underpass Park. It's part of the same organization. It's also in Toronto. It's at the east end of Toronto. You can see it up in here, in this area in here. And this is the blow-up of that area. The area in pink is Underpass Park. This is a park designed by Michael von Valkenburg, very well-recognized park. But again, PFS designed the community structure before the parks even went in. So we were in command of where the parks were, what they consisted of, even though in this case other landscape architects took some of that work on. At least we had the ability to craft a community that was really going to work for the people that were going to live there. There's an overhead shot. There's Michael von Valkenburg's park here. Sherburne Common is way down over here somewhere. But this is, like every city in North America, and certainly in Bangkok, there's this detritus that goes through the city, this concrete stuff that is endemic. It's everywhere. It's not going away, at least not probably in our lifetime. So you really have to learn how not only to live with it, but maybe to make it better. So we decided that we could do something with the underside of this elevated expressway. This was the existing conditions. This was in a rough part of town. The only things that happened here, people would park cars, there were drug deals and petty crime. Those were the 3 things that happened in this park. Yet we had a community that was on both sides of this expanse, and our client needed to know that we could make this a safe and enjoyable way of moving from one side of the community to the other. it also wasn't this cathedral-like space where the overhead structure was elevated. It was squat. It was ugly. It was a really rough condition to deal with. So this is what we started with. We told our clients that we could not only make it safe, but we could probably do something really good with it. You see a model of the development on either side. It's a small park. It's only, it's about 1.5 hectares. I don't know how you would convert that to, do you use hectares? You don't use hectares, you use rye, right? Yeah, I have no idea how many rye. Do you? 1,600 rye? Oh, there you go, 1,600 rye. This is the community we designed. Whoops, sorry. It's centered on a new street that we designed. So we actually made the street a park by moving the street to one edge and having the sunny side of the street become a much more expansive park space that ended up on Michael von Valkenburg's park. There was another park that took us down into this area, which we call Underpass Park, and then to more of the community on the north side. We didn't have a lot to work with in terms of landscape area, but we didn't really need that much. We just looked for areas that were open to the sky, that weren't covered by the overpass. We decided those are the places that should be planted. And the rest of it was really just to take advantage of free weather protection. Because Toronto, it rains, it snows, it does all that kind of stuff. So if there was a way to get recreation under there that people could stay at least dry, that's what we thought would be the best idea. So you can see here, this is one of the openings in that. Hardy grasses and trees. In Canada, we have snow and ice, and so one of the ways of dealing with that to keep it off the roads so that the roads become able to be traveled on is they use salt. So they'll laden the roads with salt to melt the ice, but then when they clear the salt, it falls up. In this case, it falls up and over the overpasses and ends up in these landscape areas. So the selection of plant material had to somehow tolerate this enormous amount of salt. But we eventually found something that was going to work. Nighttime was probably the most important concern of our client. They wanted to make sure that there was a safe way of moving through, but we wanted to make it fun and safe at the same time. So we did spend a lot of time thinking about how lighting and park elements were going to navigate people through this space. And we came up with this notion we call it the ribbon bench. Here it is here, these things. And we used them in a variety of ways. And they ended up creating the route, the legibility of moving through this underpass area. But it also used to edge the planting materials, again, to guide people through the space. Simple seating. People use it for BMX bike riding and skateboarding and just relaxing. And they're lit at night, so there was a very legible way, as I said, of moving through the park. And you can start to see the scale of what it was that we were dealing with in some of the planting. We worked with an artist on this project. This artist was named Paul Raff. He created this. He called this the Mirage. It was a little bit of a nod to Anish Kapoor's piece in Chicago, The Bean, where using reflective surfaces, it creates a multitude of experiences and perspectives. And the same thing happened here. So it did three things. When you're in the space, you could look up at the ceiling and you could see things that you wouldn't otherwise see in very unusual ways. It also worked into our lighting scheme. So when you lit the Mirage would then cast all sorts of different lighting. And the third thing it did is it hid the infrastructure, the ugly concrete that was falling above this from the users of the park. But the best thing that happened was the cheapest thing that happened. So we hired a group of guerrilla graffiti artists. These were legitimate graffiti artists that there was probably a dozen of them. We said that they could go ahead and tag the underpass just to recognize that this was a public park, public space, and to be somewhat respectful of the public. And other than that, that was their only rules. And so you can see how they took it over and they transformed this dreary, terrible place You know what's interesting about this park, it's probably one of the least glamorous parks that our firm has ever done, but it won not only the ASLA's Award of Excellence, which is their top award out of 400 or 500 entries, it was featured at the Smithsonian in New York City, the Cooper Hewitt Design Museum for the Smithsonian, which was the greatest design honor of my life, but it was an unusual project to have that award. But they gave it because this was the everyday person's place. This was the simple place, common sense. And the kinds of people that were using this were the people that generally didn't have a space. They were less privileged than some of the other people that lived in the other parts of the city. So for all of those reasons, they thought it was a pretty special piece of work. All right, last park. How am I doing for time? Am I doing okay? Yeah. Lots of time? Not a lot. A little bit. Okay, I'll go faster. Lansdowne Park. Lansdowne Park is in the city of Ottawa. It's actually one of the most important parks in the city. It is the most important. It's their signature park. For any of you who know anything about Canada, it's called Parliament Hill. This is where the seat of government is in Canada. And along Bank Street is the location of Lansdowne Park. Now, Lansdowne Park historically was a community space. It still has historic buildings. This was called the Aberdeen Pavilion. It still exists. It was a place where community came together for agricultural fairs and cultural events and football games. Football was very popular. Football not being soccer, but football being North American football was very popular at the time. So this shot was probably taken in the 1940s. But after a while, probably started in the 1970s, people lost interest in this place. Like so many cities, they become fickle, and they do lose interest in places. So the community functions disappeared. The football team was struggling. Nobody came to the games. And really, it just became a sea of asphalt and a whole bunch of parking. So in 2014, the City of Ottawa came up with an international design competition because they had tried to revitalize this place many times with no success because they took it out to the private sector, and the private sector doesn't know how to develop public open space. So this was our scheme for an international design competition. We were up against SWA, West 8, Michael von Valkenburg, I think WA, 4 or 5 firms. Our scheme won, but it won without that fancy bridge. The city didn't want to afford that fancy bridge. But this is the scheme that we ended up eventually winning. And in fact, it's very, very close to the scheme that was delivered. This is in construction. The park was more about convincing the public and trying to solve all of the infighting that was going on between different groups in the city. The residents didn't like what was going on. The private development group didn't like what was going on. The sports guys didn't like what was going on. But the city hired us to deliver the best thing for the city. So we had to accept that there are all of these competing interests, and the park couldn't be all things to all people, nor did we want it to be all things to all people, but we tried our best to solve some of the concerns, or most of the concerns that everybody had. And this is the park today, a little overhead shot of it in the city of Ottawa. And we got just about everything that we wanted. What's interesting here for you sustainable folks is this area in here. We call this the Great Lawn. I'll have some better photographs of it later, but it's actually a stormwater retention system. It sits below grade, below this lawn, because they were having huge flooding problems in this part of the city. And they had no way of solving it because of the elevation of this canal that went around here. So we would hold vast amounts of water underneath this field in here. A bit of a close-up. The other thing that we did is we worked with private developers. So this is a multi-functioning development. This was the first time that private development could occur on public land in Canada. That's kind of interesting. So the project was a renovated sports field, new private development, commercial, residential, and then the ancillary spaces that we developed for the park itself. So you can see just a few of the photographs. I'm going to go through these a little quicker because I want to get to something else. Looks cold there. One of the things that is important to Canadians is working with Indigenous people. Our Indigenous people are called First Nations and Inuit, so there's actually two groups. In the First Nations, there's many tribes, if you will, many groups. In this part of Canada, it's the Algonquin, and we actually worked with them when we came up. This is just one example. We came up with a pattern of paving that actually is the Algonquin basket weaving pattern that they use in their traditional ceremonies and things like that. That same space full of market, and the inside of that pavilion, which was restored at the same time. It works at nighttime. This is the longest bench in Canada. This is game day. Again, we put in another skating rink because Canadians love skating. They like snowman making, curling, and tobogganing. This is another integrated art piece. This is called Moving Surfaces. It was also developed by Jill Anholt. It's programmed with thousands of LED lights so that it can be programmed at any time of the evening on any event that's going on in the park itself. This hill that we developed between the park and the stadium, we call it Scotchman's Hill. In Canada, Scotchman's Hill just means a very inexpensive way of enjoying the game without paying for a ticket to go inside the stadium. So the public, we specifically designed the hill so that the public could sit on the hill and watch the game without paying. The sports teams don't like that because they want to sell tickets, but no, they had to live with this. It also has become the main venue for large-scale concerts. And everyday fun. I always like to end these things with kids. I think that's such an important part of our profession, is making delightful places where kids can have fun. Kids can be kids. Okay, quickly, do I have 10 minutes? Yeah. Okay. We're leaving Canada. We're getting into China. And I just wanted to take a look at a couple of my notes here because I want to remember what I was going to say. And these are important. This first project I'm going to show you it's quite relevant to Bangkok. I think it's really, really important. There are two things that hold my fascination with doing work in China. One is challenge and one is opportunity. It's an incredible challenge to work there, but the payoff is big and the opportunities are great. China, and I suppose this is the same as in Bangkok, their cities continue to be some of the densest in the world. By necessity, the Chinese have had to be very inventive about the way that they develop their cities now because they have so many people living in them. So we played a role in a couple of projects that I'm going to show you. We've been working in China for about 25 years. We've delivered dozens and dozens of projects there. But the two I'm going to show you couldn't be more different. One is an enormous, complex, urban project that runs through the center of an existing city, which I think is relevant to maybe some opportunities here in Bangkok. And the other one is a very small-scale gem that I've never presented before, but I thought tonight might be the night. In Canada, a friend and a colleague of mine once said to me that I was the most famous landscape architect that no one had ever heard of. And that's true, because in Canada, landscape architects aren't very well known. But in China, it's a totally different story. So, as I say, I've worked there for 25 years. I have a rather large following. And in one of my early assignments there, I was in a city called Juzhou. It was in Changsha, or near Changsha in Hunan province, so this is sort of the center of China. And I was there to work on a project, but the people I was working for asked me if I could give an impromptu lecture to some of the city administration and students at the university. Hunan has a famous architecture school there. And they wanted me to talk about the city. And I said, well, I've never been to this city before. And they said, well, we'll drive you around. So they drove me around to a variety of places. and there was 3 guys in the car, and they all started sort of laughing and pointing. And this is what they were pointing to, and this has probably happened to POC, I have a feeling. So are these building-sized posters, and I look up, I was in the car, and I look up, I break down laughing. These were all over the city. And I still don't know to this day why these were all over the city, but it says something like master something, something, something. And to their credit, the next day, this impromptu lecture that they had organized had 1,200 people. And I was supposed to be giving a lecture on their city, which I had never seen before. So it was kind of an interesting thing. So that's the opportunity in China, I think. Here's the first project. It's called Zhongshan Road. It's in a city called Ningbo. Ningbo is a medium-sized city in China. There's about 8 million people that live there. So in Canada, this would be much bigger than the largest city in Canada. In China, this is a second-tier city. Zhongshan Road is the central artery. It's a historic route that goes from the Pacific Ocean all the way to India, and this was the beginning of it. Ningbo is a very wealthy city because of its port, because of its trading, etc. The road itself was quite a complex, convoluted set of cars and buses and bikes and people, but you can see it's a major, major street. These photographs were taken after we did the project, but it gives you a sense of the scale of the street itself. And in fact, yesterday when I went through Benchikitty Park, I kept on walking and I got to Rama 4, right? Rama 4 Road. This is the exact same scale as Rama 4. Rama 4 scared me at walking along that road. This is the exact same situation where a road dedicated only to traffic was separating people from one side of the city to the other side of the city. And because there was a couple of really forward-thinking planners at the city who had traveled around the world and had to renovate this road because they were putting a subway underneath it, they recognized the opportunity and they really wanted to do something for people, and they wanted to do something that was green. So they hired us. They hired us, and they hired an engineering institute out of Shanghai. This is the biggest project our company's ever worked on. It will be the biggest project that we've ever worked on, nothing bigger. It's 9 kilometers long. So that's from, just to put it so you understand, that would be from this university, I think, to where Rama 4 hits Sukhumvit Road. That's how big this project was. It was reinventing the entire stretch of the road. When we got the project and we started working on it, our clients, with surprise, told us that our work had to go from building to building. It wasn't just designing a road. It was designing from one side of the street to the other, including all of the properties, all of the edges, all of the meet-to lines. There were hundreds and hundreds of properties along this road. We had to design for every one of them. So think about that as landscape architects, to have that kind of an effect on a city, to be able to transform a situation from something that was quite dire to something that's pretty wonderful now. This was the existing conditions. And I don't mean this as any disrespect, but some of these conditions reminded me of Rama 4 Road. This was very typical 10 years ago of most second-tier cities in China. First-tier cities had cleaned things up, but most cities were like this. And you can see the places were vast. They were crumbling. Conditions like this. Look at this crazy thing here. This is the road up here, and this is the retail down in here. How are we going to put all this together? But this was the length of the road, and this was the conditions that we had to deal with. And we had to deal with it when the businesses were still open and people were still moving along the street. So it was a highly complex project. You can see what we were running into. As we would finish something, people would then take it over and take possession of the space even before the work was finished. This is an example, overhead shot of these. There were no build-to lines. We went from building to building, that we had to create all sorts of ways of mitigating grade and creating space for a variety of buildings along the road. We also had to do all of the ancillary spaces on the edges of the road. So this ended up being, I don't know, maybe 10 big parks and a whole bunch of squares, and it just went on and on and on. I think we must have lost a lot of money. I don't know. We started with one of our offices. We had 3 offices in China. We started with one of them. We then brought in the other one, and then we brought in the third one. At one point, we had 100 people working on this project. The budget for this project, including the engineering, so there's underground as well as overground, in Canadian dollars, it was $1 billion Canadian. So in Thai dollars, I think that's $23 billion Thai. That was our budget. So it's definitely the biggest project that we've worked on. It was obviously split between engineers and ourselves and everybody else. But this is an example of collaboration, because the government said to the engineers, you are going to work with these guys. And they said to us, you're going to work with those guys. They put us together, we cooperated, and it turned out to be a remarkable success. Oh, there's the picture on the poster. Whoops. We also, there was 840 existing cinnamon trees. We saved 800 of them. And these were the conditions they were in. They were stuck in these little concrete holes. Their root balls were totally compressed like this. We ended up giving them brand new spaces, and these trees are now thriving. They're probably 20 or 30-year-old trees, or 40 or 50-year-old trees. We had to deal with historic areas, so this is one of the ancient gates of the city. There's a tower over here that was built in the 1400s that was falling down that we had to work with the engineers to support, this guy here. And then we interpreted a little bit of the new roadway to hopefully respect some of the 1400 or the 1400s temple that we were working with. So we were charged with everything. So every pavilion, every urban furniture, site amenity, planting, bus stops, everything that you see was put onto our firm. And on one hand, it was a real burden. But on the other hand, it was probably the most exciting piece of work that we had ever done. And to their credit, the Chinese, what I love about the Chinese, there's a lot of things that are very difficult in terms of working with the Chinese, but the great thing about it is they're willing to take risks. They're willing to experiment. In North America, you would never get a North American government to do this kind of stuff. Just we had to design the pavilions. This is a coffee shop that we designed using translucent concrete on one of the details. But some of the green spaces, the planting was, I can't remember how many plants, the canal edges. And underneath all of this was a brand new subway facility that exited hundreds, if not thousands of people out onto the street. Happens in all Chinese cities, people dancing at night. Okay, so the reason I think that that's relevant, it seems to me that the streets of Bangkok could be improved dramatically, especially some of the bigger streets. I know that's easier said than done, but if there's a political will, if there's an administrative will, if there's a way to demonstrate that doing something like that has a financial payback, then it's worth pursuing. And probably somebody in this crowd here, one of young landscape architecture students or one of these emerging professionals, and you'll get an opportunity to redo something of a similar scale in Bangkok. And then people will say, well, how would you pay for that? What happened at the project I just showed you is the property values along that road have tripled since we did the work. The tripling in the property values and the taxes that come from that actually ended up paying for the project. So there is a way to do this. You just have to be communicative. You have to be collaborative. You can do this kind of stuff. And that's really what's very exciting about landscape architecture. Last one. an eco-resort in Zhejiang province, fairly close to Shanghai. You can see it's only 160 kilometers away. So it's this area right here. It's in Anji, and Anji is famous for agricultural products and bamboo. It's a beautiful, beautiful part of China. This was our site. So it wasn't a brownfield. It was an abandoned green field. This is an old school. The school was abandoned. There were no more children. They built a new school, and there was no children to fill this school. So this became the site of a new resort, which actually followed a lot of the historic footprint of the old school. We did a plan. This one's a little too neat and tidy, but we started with really messy sketches. And we ended up creating this resort, which is, it's been sold out from the day it opened. So it tells us that whatever we did, along with however the Chinese promote this, was a pretty wild success. And what we convinced the client of doing is working with the agricultural landscape and pulling that landscape into the experience of the resort. That's what it is, this whole idea of eco-resort. We wanted them to hire underemployed people in the community to farm this area and then use the products from the farm to go into the food services in the resort itself. And it actually is work to do all of that. We also worked with an architect that was remarkably collaborative out of Beijing, young guy. He had, we had a mutual respect. So I trusted him, he trusted me. Together. It was a very unusual relationship because it was almost like we were on one big team. We worked together so closely. But this is an example how you can blur the lines of inside and outside. And I know in Thailand and some of the resorts you do this so beautifully that maybe this isn't exceptional. But to us, it was a pretty exceptional piece of work where you almost couldn't see the line between built form and landscape. This is a shot looking the other way, looking into the agricultural valley through the lobby of the resort. And a front view. This allowed us to really capitalize on our understanding of materials and detailing, and the architects followed through with similar attitudes. So this is more about beauty. This is why I like this. I like places like this. It makes me feel happy. So there was a variety of different open spaces. You know, these simple rock gardens. There was water gardens. There, just a variety of things. That we ensured that the perimeter wall that we built here, this guy here, in a water court, which used to be one of the play areas for the elementary school, the same geometry layout, didn't prevent people from viewing. This is some Mao saying. I can't read Chinese, but it is dedicated to Mao, and we thought, well, we should allow the people in the resort to experience that. So that governed the height of the wall there. We created a lot of not community gardens, but gardens for the foodstuffs in the hotel. We kept all the cars away from the hotel. If you came to this place, you had to park in a remote location, and you either had to walk through the rice fields or the canola fields to get to the hotel, or you could be picked up by shuttle, but you couldn't bring a car near the hotel. And we tried to honor the design traditions and the materiality of the Anji community. So the stonework that you see and the kinds of sensibilities to the landscape really reflect how the people in that community would have done it themselves. Even in winter. This is one of my favorite photographs, actually. When we got to the property, when we first started, there was all of these disconnected water courses that went throughout the site. They were full of garbage. They didn't connect with anything. We managed to put them all back together, and because of the hillsides surrounding the property, there's an awful lot of water that flowed through the property. We're able to consolidate it into one large stream that runs along one edge of the resort itself. So this is actually stormwater. And I'm going to end right there. Thank you. Thank you for letting me take probably more than an hour. Questions? You got to have questions.
Thank you very much, Greg, for the inspiring presentations. Now we open for a short Q&A. If anyone have any questions, just raise your hand.
Thank you for a wonderful project and sharing the thought with us. I think you talked a lot about a collaboration process between engineer and architect, right?
Yes.
I would be interested to understand more about how would you collaborate with clients, especially what is the difference between working in Toronto, you're working with the cities, I assume, right?
Yes. Yeah, well, a tripartite government, yes.
Part of a government and part of the private, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I can see that in Toronto, in the park project, first of the three parks that you show is
Yes.
really successful in terms of activating the space. I can see that a lot of activities like markets and concert a lot of activity that activate on that lawn.
Yes.
The great lawn. How you come up with this? Would you work with the city or would you work with the end user to think that what kind of activity should be happening here? And also in comparison with the China, how would be the difference between the two countries?
At the park that you're talking about, I think it was Lansdowne Park, right?
The Lansdowne Park, yes.
The City of Ottawa, to their credit, they've actually done a remarkable job maintaining the park, but they've also got a large programming department. So in the conceptual delivery of our park design, we presented them a park program. It was probably 10 or 15 pages of things that they could do, and we illustrated how they could do it and how many people could occupy a space. And we just handed it over to their programming department, and they've done a remarkable job. So they program the park probably every day of the year for something. And so they know the carrying capacity, they advertise it throughout the city, they change things around to accommodate whatever happens there. So they are largely responsible for the program. That answer your question?
Yes. But we anticipate that this gonna happen in the space that landscape architect design, right?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Good evening. I'm interested in the project, so I would like to know more about your opinion. How would you beyond the project and inspire your idea in Thai landscape in a modern society, even if the Thai population still have own ancient belief among multicultural environment? Thank you.
If I understand, you're wondering how you could introduce a contemporary layer into design sensibilities in Thailand? Is that sort of the question? Is that how would I go about doing that?
I would like to know your opinion. How would you inspire your idea and beyond this project in Thai landscape?
Mm-hmm.
If
Well,
it's possible.
I think it's possible. I think everything's changing. Young people are taking over the world, so young people have new ideas, and new ideas can translate into all sorts of things. I think what's important is that you need to have a respect for the place. You have to have a respect for history. You have to understand the cultural confines. But there's no reason why you can't add a contemporary way of thinking. Young people think differently than older people, and the present is very different than the past. So there are a few examples. I don't know Bangkok well enough to point out one in Bangkok, but in my travels in other parts of Thailand, I've seen contemporary interpretations of more historic Thai sensibilities, and I think that they've been quite successful. I know Kerry Hill. Kerry Hill is Australian, right? Yeah. So he did a project in Chiang Mai, and I think it was a great success, a very contemporary resort on the river in Chiang Mai, and he was able to extract things that were important to the Thai society, I think. Certainly a lot of Thai people go there not just to stay, but there's an old colonial house in the center of this thing, and there's a restaurant. And, a lot of Thai people seem to really enjoy the place, not just tourists. So I think that that's just one example I can think of off the top of my head where a new idea was introduced, and it sits very comfortably within the confines of the city.
Thank
I hope
you.
that answers your question. Yeah.
All right. Anyone else? Probably the last question for
I wonder when you have assignment, how do you begin with? Like, what are your steps in taking action, or what are key considerations?
How would I begin an assignment? Is that the question?
Yes.
I'm sorry, the fan is quite noisy and it's hard to.
When you have assigned a project, and how do you begin with it? Like, there are each part have its problems, and I wonder how do you begin, like, what are the steps that you take that to come up with the idea?
That's a really good question. And a lot of designers would lie to you, and they would tell you that they start with a very detailed analysis and they work their way up until they get to a concept. And that is partly true. And you do have to do proper analysis. You have to really understand the place, your client, the constraints, the opportunities of a project. You have to understand all of that. But I'll speak for myself and speak for a lot of my colleague designer friends. Sometimes you'll start with a very quick napkin sketch. You've already got an idea. When you become comfortable with design, ideas come very quick. It's like a writer. You know, if you're a brand new writer, writing is very difficult. When you become a very what's the word I'm looking for? But just someone that's been very experienced at writing, unless they have writer's block, they can just move very quickly, and they know the ending before they've even started the beginning of a story. I think designers, they're both creative pursuits. I think designers are the same. I think you can see something, but then you shouldn't say, I've got the solution. You should park that somewhere and then go through the analysis and really understanding it. You might come back to something that resembles your first idea, but I think most designers get a first idea. Pak, do you get a first idea? Yeah, he's a great designer. Did you know? I think you have to record your first thinking. Yeah.
How long do you normally work on a project, and how long does your plot take? Like, for example, 5 months on the project, but your plot is just 1 week.
Oh, my part?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. There's another lie that designers say. It depends. So, landscape architecture, some of these projects take years, 5, 6 years, 7 years, 10 years. They take a long time. So you're constantly moving in and out of a project because it takes so long. It has to go to committees, to review panels, to government agencies for budgeting, coming back for value engineering. It goes back and forth and back and forth. But to be truthful to your question, if it's a project that I'll speak for myself, if there's a project that I can handle quite easily by myself, like this project here. So even though I talk about collaboration a lot, and we collaborate with the architect, this is really a product of my own and my partner in Shanghai, a woman named Anna Liu. We decided that we loved this project so much that we weren't going to let anybody else near it. So we actually both worked on this, on the design part, for about, I'd say about 6 or 7 months, and on an ongoing, regular basis. Not every day, but on an ongoing basis. But the bigger project that I showed you, the road, we had over 100 people working on that project. So my time was spent setting some basic parameters, and when I could, going to our lead designers and helping them solve problems. In most landscape architecture offices of any size, if a principal tells you that they do all the work, they're probably not telling you the truth. You've got a team of very talented designers, and you're all doing the work. Yeah, that help?
And I wonder how do you, like, I have seen you doing a lot of parks project. I wonder if you apply anything to your own garden, like, is it some similarity?
Well, my own garden, the reason I wanted to show you my garden is on one side is natural and one side is less natural. On the natural side, I don't do anything. I put in birdhouses and paint them funny colors. And the rest of it is it's just a natural forest. It takes care of itself, and that's the best thing. And when you have a natural landscapes generally take care of themselves. They tolerate drought or heavy rain and certain temperatures. On the design side, I think it reflects a little bit of my design sensibilities. Probably doesn't, I don't know if it reflects my personality, but I like things very clean and simple. I like a certain order to things. I know a lot of designers don't like that. They like, in a sense, a controlled messiness. But no, I do like a semblance of order and a reflection of the architecture that surrounds my garden. So my home, which I designed as well, the garden is really an extension. It's a geometric extension of my home.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. He's the former president of Thailand.
His friends. So, hi, Greg. Thank you for reminding us that it's the business first. So I'd like to know, how do you do business in this political and economy landscape, like currently? And at one point you have like 100 person working in one project and operate from Canada and project in China, and now China is kind of slowing down. Where's next? Thanks.
Well, you notice the color of my hair is gray. I've got gray hair. That's from having that kind of work. I don't know whether, I suppose you can learn how to conduct business. I took it naturally. My father was a business person, and maybe I learned it through him. I'm not sure. I like people. I like talking. I'm an extrovert. That helps in business. I like to communicate. I like to make friends. And if you make friends, you will do well in business. Nobody wants to work with somebody they don't like. Nobody. They want to work with people they like. They want to know that they're going to enjoy a meeting with you. So I think one of the key components of business is not just the financial side and the statistical side or the strategic side. It's the human side that allows you to engage with people and hold them tight. And I think there was another question about how you collaborate with engineers, which is the same thing. Make engineers your friends. Tell your engineers that you can make them heroes, because you can. They can do exactly what they want to do. You just adding something to their work, you can make them look good, and you get them to be friends of yours. It's. I think that would be my advice.
Very good.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Can I have one question? If you may notice the audience here very young, so we should quite new because there are a lot of high school students here. In my time when we started, nobody understands about landscape architecture at this age. And then in our generation, we work for like 20-something years, 30 years, and then in your generation. So you see, you have a lot more experience than us. But in terms of landscape, 40 years is very short. In terms of nature, 40 years, like tree life, 40 years very short. So I wonder the perspective that you see when you enter the profession 40 years ago, and then now, and what do you see the change in landscape architecture, and did you disappoint, or do you see it in a better place or in the worst place?
I think landscape architecture has gotten, well, I can't speak for the situation in Thailand or anywhere. Well, actually, I can speak about it in China. There's a great respect for landscape architecture in China, like a huge respect. They understand the power, the value of landscape. They understand how to leverage all sorts of situations through landscape. I mean, the Chinese are transactional, and I don't mean that as a disrespect. They want to get something out of something, and so they don't look at landscape as a bad thing. They look at landscape as a good thing. And as soon as that happens, then all sorts of opportunities open. But speaking in North American terms, I think landscape architecture 40 years ago was pretty dismal. It was misunderstood. It's still a little misunderstood, but it's gotten a lot better because of great landscape architects that are delivering work in cities all throughout North America. You can't ignore the stuff that happens in New York City or Toronto or in Vancouver in some cases. People know that for some reason these cities are better, these spaces are better. What is it about these spaces? And all of a sudden the New York Times and the Washington Post and the Toronto Globe and Mail, they're writing about landscape architecture and they're communicating the value of it. And I think those messages start to trickle into the minds of politicians. Are probably the most important source of support for the profession. I know it sounds kind of weird, but a landscape, because it's in the public realm, there's a political dimension to it. It's not like a private building. In a private building, there might or might not be a political dimension, but in open space there always is. And so if you can get close to a politician, and I don't mean in a coercive way, I mean if you can communicate with politicians to show them the advantage of what it is that you're proposing and get them on your side, then they get the administration on their side. And then you've got champions that are working for you, and all of a sudden you're doing better projects. And I think that, in turn, brings more respect to landscape architecture. And certainly, I guess my last answer to your question, Pak, is the scope of landscape architecture has gotten huge. If you want to make it that big, you can do it that big because the projects are they're more and more complex, they're more and more interrelated, and the more that you can take on of something and solve for that, the more in demand you're going to be, and the more in demand the profession is going to be.
So this still have future.
Huh?
This still have future.
There's the future. Yeah, I love it. I love it.
Okay, I know this sounds, it might sound a bit generic, but I really want to know which part of the design, like the process of the design, which part do you think is the most difficult, like, or you're usually struggling with it the most?
Which part? Well, I'm lucky that I have a strong design sensibility. So design usually comes quite easy to me. Not always. I mean, sometimes I'm banging my head against the wall. But so design is easy. I suppose the administrative part of it, which I don't do anymore. I have partners that do all of that. But administrating a firm. So if you have a firm of 10 or 20, 30 people, you have to organize. Not only organize yourself, you have to organize them, and then you have to put it into some sort of cohesive form so that you can present it to people. So I think it's not the design part, it's that middle part of putting all the pieces together. I don't think it's design. I think design, for most of you, if you're in here in a design community, that design will flow. Probably numbers is hard. Budgets.
Thank you.
Okay.
First off, I want to thank you for taking your time to lecture us. I would like to ask, have you ever creativity blocks? And if you have, how do you solve it?
Yes. How do I? So yeah, it does happen. It does happen. Well, how do I solve it? Usually by trauma. So in other words, somebody says, why haven't you solved this problem? Or in your school here, do you have in your studios, you put up work and then people critique the work? Is that right?
Yes.
And in some cases, that gets very traumatic. Because what you thought was wonderful, somebody says, oh, that wasn't very wonderful. I don't know whether you're brutal here or not, but the schools I went to, it was mean. It was really mean. Because they're trying to train you for being in front of a client and for a client to say, this stuff, go away. So I think, not to make too much fun of that, but I think if you're having a design block, you're probably not presenting a very convincing design. You'll present something, but it probably won't be your best. It probably won't even be, it'll be close to the bottom. So to have somebody else say, and it's usually a partner or somebody else in the firm saying, I don't think this is working out. What if we did it this way? So that comes into this notion of collaboration and two heads are better than one. I don't think I'd be able to have the success, our firm I don't think would have the success it had if people were designing in silos. I think it's always having people to talk to bounce ideas off of, to have studios. That was one of the dilemmas. We were talking about this earlier about COVID, when students couldn't come together and actually bounce ideas off of one another. That's where the good ideas come from. Somebody says, well, what about this? And you say, well, that's not bad, but what if we added a tail over here and then we'll paint it purple or whatever it is, and you'll come up with something a lot more exciting, usually. And I think that's probably one way of getting through this creativity block. Do you have creativity block?
All the time.
Well, you have to talk to your friends. They'll help you.
Thank you very much.
All right.
All right. Okay.
Thank you very much for your lecture. As you see today, there are so many landscape architects want to be, and they're young and they're not even a landscape architect yet. So can you tell them what makes you a success landscape architect?
See, the faculty always ask the hard questions. I knew there was going to be a hard question. This profession is very hard, and if you haven't discovered it yet, I don't know what year some of you are in or whether you've even started landscape architecture. All design professions are very difficult because I don't know if you've heard the expression, you're wearing your heart on your sleeve. It means when you're designing, you're exposing your personality to a whole bunch of people, and half the time you don't even know these people. You're taking a risk that they're going to like you, they're going to like your ideas. So design is inherently challenging. It's stressful. And that'll continue all throughout your career, but it's also, and we were talking, Kun Munkor and I were talking about this on the way here, that there's a reward for being a designer. If I look at friends of mine that are in other professions and talking to them about their careers, very few of them say, oh, I did this incredible thing around the corner, or isn't the city great for what it is that we've developed, or isn't the environment a lot healthier now that we've just saved 400 acres of land for some other kind of use? That there's a pride that comes with designing something, planning something, designing something, creating something that is of value to your neighborhood, your community, your city, your country, whatever it is, that very few people get to experience. Very few people in conventional professions get to experience that. I mean, yes, doctors save lives, and that's really important. But there's all sorts of professions out there that at the end of the day, they've done their job, they've done it well, but they don't really have anything to draw on to give them sort of the sense of self-achievement. So I think design does that. Design education does that. Being professional designers does that. But it's really hard. So to become successful, it just takes a long, long time. Long, long time.
All right. Thank you very much, Greg, for your inspirations, the presentations, and very valuable insight. I'm very agree with Greg, พี่ป๊อก and อาจารย์แก้วนะฮะ that most of our audience over here, probably 90%, are student, or I mean even high school student. So you get a very good chance, like people said, that at my time I knew nothing about landscape architect before. So now you got a very good chance to study with the expert. So try to get this chance as much as you can if you get opportunity. So.